Hey, welcome to Cold Turkey Podcast. Happy New Year, everyone. We're January 2nd. As I record this, we're a bit before that, but I hope and wish you a better New Year than last year. Yeah, I mean, I'm so my batteries are full right now because I just finished recording my podcast with Noah, and God damn it, sometimes like I told him after we recorded that sometimes you discuss with someone that you can relate to, and sometimes you discuss with someone that you relate a bit less, and there's like almost an exercise, a mental exercise of finding a phrase or like a term, like some sentences that you find yourself like is like yeah that's me. In the case of Noah, there was some passage and like the conversation we had where I was like, who the fuck debriefed Noah about my life story? Like not necessarily in in events, but especially in feelings and in ways that like he felt about himself or even like some of the perception. It was weird to a point where like even like we don't have the image, but I did like the stuff that he was drinking during our recording, I was actually drinking the same thing, like, which was just like odd coincidence, you'd say, but it was well, sincerely noted by your host, me. It was great. It was great conversation. Like I appreciated it quite profoundly and greatly. Just wanted to let you know, like I changed my podcast hoster. No impact for you guys, like unless you have problems finding the podcast. But it changed, like some stuff in terms of my analytics and, like eventually, like knowing more about my audience, which will make me adapt. And, like I try to always make the podcast evolve. I will try to also update probably the image of the podcast, like change the logo, make it maybe a bit more elaborate, as will the intro and outro songs. I'm working on that, only because, like I'm about to go through the 2nd year anniversary, like which is in March, but I'm really happy about it, like, and I'm proud of myself, to be honest. And, and still, like if you want to share the podcast, let the podcast know to your friends, family, people your contacts. Don't hesitate to do so. I'm always available to talk, like so you can message me, DM me. I will answer to all of your questions or comments. And without further ado, here's Noah. Enjoy. Hey Noah, how you doing?
I'm good, Alex. How are you tonight?
I'm doing great. We did a lot of chatting before the recording, but it was a crazy year.
I hadn't noticed. What happened? Did something happen? It's been totally normal here in New York.
Yeah, and I'm coming to that. Like I've been asking the same question for the past 9 months. Where are you located? You just said it, New York. And how has the pandemic been for you in terms of, like the impact on your life, maybe your professional life, and even your sobriety?
Well, wow, that's a bunch. First of all, I'm located in Brooklyn, New York, in an area of Brooklyn called Park Slope. The pandemic has been interesting to be part of and also to witness. I'm 57 years old, so I'm not young and I'm not freaked out by life anymore. And I'm also a sober man. So I have, in a weird way, I think being sober, and I've talked to a bunch of people about this, being sober during the pandemic has been a gift because we live lives that are focused on the day at our best. We try to live one day at a time. And I think everybody else has sort of whether against their will or not, had to just live one day at a time because everything has been changing so rapidly. My sobriety has exploded, and I've gone to more meetings during the pandemic because of Zoom and being locked down than I've almost ever gone to. And I found a new sponsor because I went to a meeting via Zoom in LA, and I heard this guy speak, and he had 48 years, and he sounded like Yoda, and he's a spiritual monster. His name is Luther Woods. I want to give him credit. He's 83 years old with 48 years of sobriety, and we started working the steps together. And it's the third day I was working with him. He said, "You look lighter," because we have Zoom meetings. And I said, "I feel lighter." I said, "I don't know what you've done, but you've changed." So I feel stronger spiritually, emotionally, work-wise. It's been a weird time. I work for a company called Soul Cycle. I'm a senior instructor there. It's a spinning class. It's indoor cycling. So we haven't been able to do any indoor exercise. They were paying us 100% salary. Then they dropped us to 75% salary, then 50% salary. Then they furloughed us. I was furloughed for about 2.5 months until they reopened with studios outside. So right now I'm currently teaching Soul Cycle or spin classes outside in a tent with a little bit of heat, but it's cold and it's fun when the people are still showing up.
The question I have for you, you talked about the Zoom meeting. I had a lot of conversation with my guests about, my initial shock about connecting virtually to a meeting. And I mean by that, I was kind of used to connecting to the, I don't know, I will phrase it by, the spirit of the room, or, the feeling the vibe and the energy of a room, which I found, I had a much harder time to find in a Zoom meeting initially. How did you adapt to that?
There's a great line that says in the big book of AA that says, "Acceptance is the answer to all my problems today." If I'm upset, it's because I don't like some person, place, thing, or some aspect of my life. And I try to live in acceptance. And a lot of people take acceptance and they go, "Well, I'm just going to let bad things happen to me." But this wasn't a bad thing. I was getting to meet people and see people and attend meetings all over the world. And, I created some great friendships. I have some great friendships because of the Zoom I've only met one guy and out of 40 or 50 new friends that I consider really good friends, even though we've never met in person, because we speak the same language and we felt the same pain and we know each other's stories without having to hug. Do I love the rooms of AA? Yes. I can't wait to get back in a big room? Sure. But for right now, if Zoom is all I have, then I'm going to be okay with it.
Wow. Bless that. Amen to that. Jeez.
What's the choice? Being angry at it?
No. I mean, it was actually kind of embracing what I felt. It was just I didn't feel it. For me, it was weird. I was like, wow, I don't feel what I wasn't that, that big of a hugger, for example, or that big of, I have my clothes. It's funny you talked about, your sponsor being 80 something. My sponsor is 79 years old, has 49 years of sobriety. He's, a wisdom, just like a endless, provision of wisdom and spirituality, and always ever expanding what, what morale is, and, always, pushing always the limits of, his thoughts, and, learning every day. And, so, and I do have a close, a close network of people that, I do like to hang around. But when I was walking into a room, there was something that I couldn't find in meetings, virtual meetings. And I felt, it was just like, actually sharing about it, like made it much better after that. Like people would say, like, well, you're a testimony of that. Like you found a sponsor in LA and you probably would have never find him if it wasn't for those virtual meetings.
Yeah, that's how I found my sponsor. Like he lives in Palm Springs, and every Sunday, we were talking about this last night. All people that he sponsors, we have a get together. We don't call it a meeting really, because it's not like he leads it off and he just sort of talks about his week. And then we all just talk about our weeks. But these are guys, listen, I'm the baby in the group at 13 years of sobriety. These guys are all 25, 35, 45 years of sobriety. And I said to them last night, I'm incredibly grateful to the pandemic for bringing me you guys.
Yeah.
I would have never met these men who are massively important to me now. My sponsor, I would have never met him. So it's like, imagine, that we who are sober and we get these Zoom meetings, if we take out the part where, if we were just normal people and we weren't sober, we would have gone through this pandemic and all these lockdowns, which have been much worse in the US because our government has handled it so terribly and everybody's broke. And now we're getting $600. But imagine going through all of this, sitting in your apartment alone, and the only Zoom meetings you have are for work. You're not connecting. At least we're connecting. We see each other's faces. We hear stories. We share. We are able to share our feelings and our emotions and say, hey, this is bothering me. And somebody listens and responds to that. Everybody else in the world doesn't have that.
Yeah.
They don't see other people. They don't see a room full of faces of people who've gone through the exact same thing they have and have found a better way out. So I think it's a blessing. I mean, if this has happened 20 years ago, we would have been doing phone calls. Would have been like trying to do conference calls.
That would have been, yeah. I mean, like that. You bring a great point. Like technology, has completely changed the face of that situation. Like if it wasn't for it, I mean, you're right. Like I would see myself, like on a rotating phone. That would have been a disaster.
We are able to connect with our fellow sober people. And that's a beautiful gift.
Yeah.
And for everybody else, I know so many people that have just been suffering, and especially during the summer when everybody was locked down and we were really, really locked down in New York and nobody was going out for months. And every night, every day, every afternoon, or any morning that I wanted to, I could look up a phone number, on the web and find a meeting at any hour somewhere in the world.
Yeah.
And just jump in.
Have you seen the impact of the confinement to some people in your own region that had a hard time keeping their sobriety?
No, I haven't really had a hard time keeping their sobriety. What's been the incredible thing that I've been able to watch is quite the reverse. I've met a bunch of young kids through about 3 or 4 different sober livings down here. Kids that checked in during the pandemic to sober living or a rehab. They've never been to a meeting in person. And they've got like 6 or 9 months or a year sober, almost 9 months or so. And they've never been to a real meeting. They only know Zoom, and they were able to stay sober through Zoom.
Wow.
They met sponsors. They worked the steps. They helped other people. So it's like, that's been like the thing that I've been most blown away by. Like they're going to be so like incredibly blown away when we're finally allowed to be humans again, because humans are meant to interact. We're meant to be communal. That's why AA works, because it's in our DNA. We're tribal. Yeah. We're herd animals. Nobody likes to use that word, that we're animals, but we're meant to cooperate with other people, and we're meant to work with other people. And that's the beauty of AA, is that we work with other people. And that's why it feels so good. It's everybody has this common goal of helping each other and helping themselves.
Yeah. I mean, there's one of my guests she had 3 weeks sober and went into lockdown, and she had enough time to actually find some friends. But, like you're describing a situation where they didn't even have that opportunity. That's even crazier. So there's going to be like sober newcomers that had yet to see a room full of people, physical room full of people that share their stories. So that's
It'll be beautiful, and I think Zoom will go on.
Oh, for sure.
Zoom will go on even when everybody's loud because it's such a great resource for people. So,
and I hope so, because there are regions here in Quebec that there's less than a meeting a week or a meeting a week, and that's not enough. For people, I hope that well, I have confirmation that a few are going to stay open. I don't know if all of them, but it will keep going for sure, and it's going to be introduced into the the funds that were that the Seventh Tradition recuperates. It's going to be funded in there, just to be sure that some meetings stay open. I guess forever, because it has changed completely. That was one of the first thing I did. Is to see how much the World Organization has got involved into kind of ruling. How do we manage a virtual meeting? If someone does not cooperate, how do we manage that? And most of the bigger worldwide organizations, and I mean by that, like the NA and the AA, had guidelines, how do we keep that a safe environment for someone to come in and the newcomer to not feel unwelcomed? And it was great, to see that. It was a quick turnaround.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, it's I've been amazed by it. Of course, have I had moments where we're locked in the apartment for months at a time and I barely getting out or just going out every day for a walk, and it got crazy and it got claustrophobic? Of course, but just like every feeling I've ever had, it passes. And when I get into gratitude and I realize I'm living in pity, self-pity, and I get into gratitude and I become grateful for things, I feel better. It's just a very simple transition. It took me decades to figure that out, and I had to run my life into the ground before I felt both in sobriety and out of it. But once I learned that gratitude is the answer and service to others is the answer, then it's been much easier sledding.
Yes. I mean, just the journey of that, having those conversations for the past almost 2 years now have been a blessing in disguise almost. So I didn't want to do it for, egoistic purpose, but it was more of an experience I was doing, to see, to kind of swallow in and like a sponge of culture and, the knowing people and knowing more and more people. And you just said it, it's an humbling and a giving back experience that I almost didn't expect. It was an experience that, I don't want to stop anymore. I feel like responsibility to keep going, and, and I love it, so it's, yeah, for me, it was just weird doing that. I enjoyed it, a lot first, and then eventually it became almost like an obligation for me. Okay, I need to find new people. I need to, there's a duty around that of, because, it's a lot of work to find guests, and, I force myself to, kind of expand the horizon of the podcast for the listeners, actually. So, yeah. Let's rewind that Noah tape and bring me back to the early times. I always tell my guests, either by substance abuse that has impacted you at young age, or your own, and bring me back there.
I'll give you a little try to make it a brief story. I was born and raised in what is called the tri-state area of New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. I was 10 years old when I started drinking and doing drugs. I had a friend that had two older brothers that were 13. And they gave me acid, and they gave me pot, and they gave me cocaine, and they gave me everything, mushrooms. So between the ages of 10 and 11, I pretty much started everything. And the drinking is the thing that I sustained. I continued smoking cigarettes until I was a little older, until I was about 14 or 15. And then I got into cocaine. And that was really the game changer for me. My three favorite things were bourbon, marijuana, and cocaine, but I would take anything.
Bring me back to the 10 years old. What was the family picture like? What was your, what kind of kid were you?
Perfect family. Beautiful. The most loving parents in the world. We moved a lot, but it was all within, about a 40-mile radius. My father was changing jobs. I went to 9 schools in 3 states in 12 years. So we moved, and I was the new kid a lot. So I believe that, I don't know what the effect of that was. I know that, it fed into, I had a weird name. Noah was a weird name back then. I didn't look like I had big fucking huge curly black hair, and everybody else had straight blonde hair or brown hair. And, I couldn't even put a comb through my hair. And I felt different, and I felt awkward. And so moving all the time and being the new kid fed into that feeling of feeling less than, low self-esteem, that low sense of self-worth. And I just felt like I stuck out like a sore thumb. So my parents are the most loving, supportive people you've ever met, and they're kind. I have a brother, and he's 5 years younger than me. And he was, we weren't, we were close. Growing up, we were fine, but I was on a mission. I was on a mission to not, people always talk about they had the first drink and it made them feel complete. And I always talk about when I first started drinking, I didn't feel complete. I just hated myself a little less. I didn't think I was so horrible as I did when I was sober, if that makes any sense.
It does. The other thing is what kind of, sometimes I hear that, there's either two choices when you move a lot and you become like the new kid in town. There's either like the extrovert, right? Like the pushing, being the class clown, and just making yourself noted.
That's me.
Okay.
Yeah. I've never been an introvert.
Okay.
Never at all. I in my mind I am.
Yeah.
With my truth, I'm very introverted with what my truth is. But I'll make you laugh. There's a story. I've got a book coming out, and there's a story of when I was elementary school. I can't remember. I think it was 4th grade, and there was a candy store on the way to the school, and I would stop by the candy store and I would buy like a bag of candy, and I would be the kid that showed up at school with a ton of candy, and everybody's like, "Oh my God!" So I would like make friends through giving candy.
Even though your self-perception was considering yourself shit almost.
Yeah. I mean, and this is all retrospect.
Oh, for sure.
This is all looking back, but I never felt comfortable being me. Looking back, what I say is like, I felt like shit and I didn't like myself. This is all me looking back 50 something years later.
Yep.
But that bag of candy in 4th grade became a much bigger bag of cocaine by the time I was in 9th grade. And it was just the same. I'm still the same. Well, I think we're all we're the same kids. We work on it, but who we are as kids never leaves us.
Oh, no. And, I'm a giver in life, so I was always the giving type, and much less comfortable receiving. I love putting a smile on people's face. I love, it's tough to make me laugh. I'm
I'm the same way.
I have like a close network of friends. There's 3 buddies that I have that we have the most fucked up humor that you can ever hear. And like I hope God that like no one will ever hear it, because
Yeah.
and this makes me laugh. Like the most messed up jokes. Like we laugh about anything, death, sickness. I mean, just sick people. Like just.
I've got my best friend. If anybody ever saw our text, they'd be like, "You are the worst people ever."
Exactly. My wife always says, "You guys are going to go to hell. You know that, right?" I'm like, no. You don't get it.
Just if I go to hell, just as long as he's there, I'm okay.
Exactly. Bring me with them, and we're going to be set.
All my friends will be there.
They'll kick me out. So at 10, things picks up quite fast in your situation.
Yeah. We moved to at 10th grade, you're saying?
I mean, like at 10 years old, you said that you experienced like the first, pretty much like the full menu. Yeah.
Everything. It was, it was like 1973. These guys were 13, and they were, it was like that 70s show. And it was like, they were just like, what happens, and I was, what happens when you give them weed? What happens when you give them coke? What happens when you give them acid? Like it was that sort of thing. And of course I wanted to be liked. So, and I wanted to be a tough guy. So I would never say no, because I didn't want to be called a pussy. That was my entire childhood, my young adulthood. And you want to jump off this building? Sure. Let's fucking jump. Let's jump off the bridge. Let's jump off these rocks. Like I always said yes.
Don't say I dare you to Noah.
I dare you was just every single time. And that became the theme. And it was like, I had to party harder than everybody. I had to drink harder than everybody. I had to drink for more days. I had to keep going when everybody else had passed out.
Was there indication before that of, like, I always talk about, like I would say between 5 and 10 years old, and my father in springtime asked me to empty the snowmobile of their gasoline. So, like doing the, like suck on the siphon thing, and, like, and I got a buzz out of gasoline.
Yeah.
And, like to this day, I consider that, I don't know, 95% of the people would have been scared shitless if at 7 years old they would catch a buzz. But it didn't scare me. And I think this was great indication of things that were coming,
Absolutely. Yeah.
And did you have, like, again, in retrospect, like, was there any indication of either by your behaviors or by I don't know, overeating, or like wanting, like almost endlessly attention from your parents, like, was there indication of you having kind of this in you already?
I think it would be, the desire to make people happy, make people laugh, make people feel better. That was, I remember being on stage. I was an actor in this play. About 11 years old, maybe 10 or 8, maybe not even 9 or 11 years old, somewhere around there. And I was the star of the show, and I was the unexpected. I didn't have a starring role, but I made my role so over the top and so big that everybody was laughing and everybody was having the best time. And I got a little write up in the newspaper, and I loved that attention. I always was making jokes, and I was, but I was actually very good at it. Eventually I ended up as a stand-up comedian in Los Angeles because that drove me, but it started very young. I was a performer. I was like a court jester. I wanted to make you happy. If everybody else were kings, I was the only court jester, and it was my job to make everybody feel good and comfortable and relaxed. And then I grew up and I threw the best parties. And then I grew up a little more and I ran nightclubs and bars, and they were always the best nightclubs and the best bar. I was a host, and I wanted you to have a good time. I always felt I wanted you to have a good time. Now in sobriety, my life is dedicated to service and helping people. So I've just taken that same impulse from childhood and just turned it on its ear and given it a different, shifted the paradigm to helping other people in a healthy way, and which also helps myself.
And eventually, so it grew from 10 years old testing everything. And you said within a year, you pretty much was hooked on some of the stuff from the menu.
Yeah, within a year or two, it was, definitely booze and weed constantly.
What was your relation with school then? Like you explained a bit about it, but then how did it transform? Because obviously, like being the class clown and, like the court jester, like you're not the most appreciated one, even though, like you find a way to make even them laugh, like not only your colleagues in class, but your teachers. But, like I guess adding substance into the mix changes your relation to authority, right? Like
I was a terrible student. I was tested when I was young. I was tested. I had a genius level IQ. By the time I graduated high school, I was in the bottom 5% of my class. I was a terrible student. I was a procrastinator. I was a liar. I was dishonest. I had no passion for school. I didn't want to learn. It just didn't feel important to me. Once I got old enough to start hustling, and hustling means drug dealing and hustling, whatever it is, street crime, things like that. No violence against people or civilians, but, hustling. I understood money. I didn't care about grades. So, that by the time I was in, high school, junior high school, I was just blowing off assignments, and I wouldn't write papers, and I would have my father fucking write them for me at the very last minute, the night they were due, because he was a great writer. And, so I didn't care. I didn't put value in education.
Did your parents see changes, and did they noted it to you?
Yeah. They did. About 13 or 14, they started like taking me to a therapist. But, I would lie to the therapist, and I would lie to them. The therapists are only as good as you are if you tell them the truth. And, they would say Noah has some antisocial behavior, and, I can't even remember what the diagnosis was there, but, it didn't matter. Nothing. I was doing enough just to get by. And the rest of my time was dedicated to making me whatever version of happiness I was at that point.
And it's like it's ironic to look at it in, like such a way that when you were, like younger, it was about getting the bag of candies to make people happy, but, like eventually becomes trying to buy peace. So, like you want to see, like you want me to see a therapist, I'll see a therapist. Like you want me to, like you want me to acknowledge that I have a problem. Yeah, sure. I do have a problem. And, like whatever you say that can make kind of the peace, like the temporary peace treaty.
It would pacify them.
Yeah.
It would pacify them. It would be, okay, you want me to do this? Sure, I'll do this. Yeah. I had no objections. I didn't fight anything, but I didn't do anything about it. I would show up. I would go to, they'd make appointments. I would go to the appointment. I'd sit with the person. I'd frustrate the shit out of the person. They'd bring me back for a couple more times, and the person would be like, I can't work with him. And there's nothing to do.
Was there, so I guess there wasn't much ambition after high school into going to college, and, like, was there like,
I went to college, but I was running away. I went to college in Texas because there were contracts out. I got very, very, very heavily involved in cocaine dealing from, let's say, 1978 to 1982 in New York City, when New York was like this epicenter of everything. And there were people who were trying to kill me. And there were contracts out of my life. So I ran away to Texas to go to college.
That was convenient. You conveniently found a program in Texas.
I was sitting on I wasn't planning on going to college, and then everybody left for college. And then I was like, shit, I should go to college. I should run away. And I was sitting with a girlfriend of mine on a beach, and she was from Texas. And I said, "What's a good school to go to in Texas?" She said, "Oh, you got to go to Southwest Texas State. That's the party school." And I was like, "I'm going there." And I called my father and I said, "I found this college," and he had some connections. He was doing very well in the corporate world in America at that point, and the United States. And he pulled some strings, and I was accepted into that school 48 hours later.
Wow.
And I left about 10 days after that to a school I had I had no pictures of it. I had a map. They FedExed me a map overnight. That was it.
And what was your ambitions in terms of, like, what was the class taken at that school?
I signed up for whatever they told me to sign up for. I got an A+. I went there for 2 semesters. I got an A+ each semester in scuba diving and a withdrawal fail in every other class.
So great scuba diver, but not,
Scuba diving, we would get in a van, we would drive out to a lake, we would have cases of beer and tons of weed, which I would supply, and I would supply all the coke. We would scuba dive, and then we would sit on a lake until way into the night because it was warm and it was beautiful, and it's the Texas countryside. And we would sit there in swimsuits and snort coke and smoke weed and play guitars, and I got an A. So it was like, that's all that mattered. That it was the most fun class I'd ever taken, and I loved scuba diving.
Did the involvement in the in the stuff that made you like almost on a death warrant, like how do you how does it progress, like from buying to selling? Do how insidious is it to like in terms of like obviously I guess like they love the loud speaking, like kind of the jester type, like that can make things happen. But
I had two personas, or two people that I had to be. So when I was out with people and I was in New York City and I was at the nightlife, I could be outgoing and friendly and positive, and so I was a salesman. You're selling something. Then when it comes to the people, the Italian men that I was dealing with, you have to be very, very quiet and just respectful and just do what you're told. So I would sell, and then I would bring my money back and I would give it to them. And then they would say, "Okay, now move this, now you move that." And it's, when I was 10 years old, a friend's sister had me run a bag of weed about a block away and deliver it to somebody else and bring the $20 back. And that was my first drug deal when I was 10. So by the time I was 15, I was in the city. I was in New York City constantly. And it started out with, an ounce here and a couple ounces there. And then it was kilos, then it was 10 kilos and 100 kilos, and staying in roomfuls of money with Colombians. And, it escalated very quickly, but I was built for that because I could be very quiet and I could be a chameleon. I could deal with the Haitians. I could deal with the Jamaicans. I could deal with the Asians. I could deal with the Italians. I could deal with everybody, and just like a chameleon, be able to adapt to any situation. If it required me to be quiet and low key and a little subservient, I could do that. If somebody needed me to be more aggressive, to be physical, to be more of a presence and like help, take care of business, I could do that as well. So I was this chameleon, and I ran around, for a lot of my life, and I honed those chameleon-like skills, which lasted me for a good portion of my life.
I don't like that expression, but how long did it stay in control? And I hope you understand what I'm saying, in terms of it was I was pretty much the same in terms of it was always excessive, but it felt in control for a while, either by having enough money for it or by me feeling in control. I don't know.
I didn't need to have control, because I had the product.
Yeah.
With all the if you're a cocaine addict and you've got, 10 pounds of cocaine, you're fine. And, 100, 200, 300, 400, and $500,000, you're great. It's when I started becoming my best customer and the cocaine suppliers cut me off and I became unreliable. That's when everything really crashed down and I had to start lying and cheating and stealing. That's when it got bad. So it was control was an illusion.
Can you bring me to these times, like what happened, and in terms of like because the spiral down seems to be kind of almost like a tick moment, like where whatever happened, like you said, like you almost become you excess what you use to what you sell.
Absolutely.
And like. Can you elaborate on like how did it start spiraling down?
I mean, when you take a shipment of coke, let's say it's a kilo, and each time you're chopping it in half, then you're chopping it in a quarter, then you're chopping it in an eighth, then you're taking that other half or whatever the percentage is, you're supposed to be making the profits off that and rolling the money over. When there is no money being rolled over and you're just snorting everything, then it just goes, and you can't pay back the person you took it from. So you take some from somebody else and you're constantly taking from other people, trying to this juggling act of constantly trying to come up with some money to pay one guy so he'll give you some more to then sell some more and do some more. And then it just eventually runs out. It's like water swirling down the drain. It's like, at one point somebody just pulls the plug and the water will drain for a while, but eventually there's going to be a large sucking noise.
Yeah.
And it's just that there's no more cocaine and there's no more money. And you owe everybody money. You owe everybody tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you have no way to pay it back. And
it's
nobody will give you any cocaine to sell because you've ripped off everybody.
The best image is paying your monthly statement of a credit card with another credit card.
Yeah, absolutely. I was doing this scam when ATMs first came out, before they had all these security procedures and everything. This is very early in 1980 or whatever, 81 or 80, something around there. And I would make deposits in my bank account when they had the envelopes that you'd put in.
Yeah.
And I would say deposit $1,000, and then I would immediately withdraw $800.
Yeah.
So the system thought I had $1,000.
Exactly.
They're like, wait, here, take 800. So I was doing that everywhere, constantly. And then they would shut down my bank account. I would go create another bank account at a different bank. I'd give them $500. I'd run that out in, about a week or two, So it was just, everything. It was I was taking losses everywhere. And it was a constant series of trying to, juggle these, 18, you're trying to juggle if you're juggling 3 balls to begin with and you're doing pretty well, and then somebody throws you a 4th ball and a 5th ball, and all of a sudden the balls are just flying everywhere and you're not juggling anymore. You're just dodging balls and everything is just fucked and your life is crumbling around you and you can watch it and you can't. Not only are you doing not anything, I wasn't doing anything to stop the cycle. I was doing everything possible to make everything worse.
When you say worse, I was expecting the word work, like to make the thing work.
No, it just got worse.
It got worse. But I love the juggling image because there's something about kind of keeping the show going, yeah. and in terms of at some point you either fake it or you look like a headless chicken where you run around and you just try to patch here, patch there, and it will never work. That it's destined to be a fucking disaster. But you seem to be doing everything to make it work, even though it won't work.
No. Not only did it not work, it got terrible. It got horrific. Every single thing I did made everything worse. Because I stopped caring. My life was falling apart, but I didn't think that highly or like my life that much to begin with. So who gave a fuck? Oh, then I tried committing suicide a couple times. That didn't work. So it just, just kept getting worse.
Can you bring me to, like the first, sometimes it's much earlier than that, but was there, like the first seed of you either waking up on an hangover or whatever, that you start thinking that this cannot be how life goes, like this cannot be, like how, like normal people don't go through life like that, or, like whatever the, like the thought process was of, like kind of getting those first seeds of what the fuck is going on? Like that can't be it.
Let me just pause you there for a second. And this is something I hear in sobriety a lot, where people say, no matter how many times I tried to stop, I promised it would be the last time. I never had that feeling. I remember being 16 years old and driving to school, and there was a liquor store, me and my best friend Rusty, who died from this disease. I was 16, he was 15, and we would stop at the liquor store, get a pint of vodka and a quart of orange juice. Sorry, I don't know that in metric terms. And we would put the vodka in the orange juice and we would drink it. And I remember looking over at him one morning and saying, like, I'm an alcoholic. And he was like, so am I. And we cheered and we drank our vodka and orange juice and we did a couple of bumps of Coke and we smoked some weed and we were off to high school. And I never experienced, I have to stop this. I've got to stop. Why is my life like this? It was an exacerbation. The feelings of worthlessness. It was just like, I thought this was just who I was. I thought this was just my lot in life. I thought this was just what I was destined for. I never questioned it. I didn't think I was that great to begin with. So when everything falls apart, you're like, well, this is just what happens to shitty people.
So did you embrace like dying young and all that stuff?
No, I didn't embrace dying young. It wasn't, live hard, die young, anything like that. It was just I was just existing. I believed this was my state of existence. This was all the life had for me. I was just going to be a drunk and a drug addict, and I would just keep going and bouncing from town to town or from home to home or place to place, wherever it was. And it was always going to be a shit show because I was not a good person.
When does it stops? I mean, like, you know what I'm saying? Like in terms of, like if it was never like even like a seed in the back of your mind that, like this diet, there's like a component of that daily diet that, like that's problematic. How?
I went to 12 rehabs. In 11 of those rehabs, I drank, I got high, and I fucked every girl that I could. And I lied to everybody. And I pretended to be sober. And I pretended to work the steps. I pretended to have a sponsor. It went on forever. So
you knew about the program. You knew about...
Yeah, I went to my first... I got thrown in rehab in 1983. 1983. I went to my first rehab in 1983. I didn't get sober until 5 years later, and about like 6 rehabs in between then. And then I went to a couple of rehabs, and then I'd gone to the final rehab. It was a 90-day program. It took me a year to complete a 90-day program because I broke so many rules. And I'd gotten drunk there, but nobody ever found out. They never tested me. And then they sent me to a halfway house, which is part of the same program. And I met a girl, and I got married. I married her in February of 1988. And we were together for about 11 months. And after that, I guess it must have been about January, we split up. We separated. She had 2 kids. She had a 6-year-old and 7-year-old and a 4-year-old. And we separated, and I was sitting in my new apartment about a week later. And I had a shower curtain, I had an alarm clock, radio, I had a pillow, a blanket, no bed, and a bag of and a laundry basket of clothing, and that's all I had in the world. I mean, I had a job, but I just didn't have anything else in my apartment. And it was a night, and I was sitting on the floor, and I felt a thump. I felt a physical tap in my chest, and I had this feeling come over me that was very profound. That I had had enough of being a fuck up. I was such an embarrassment to my family. I mean, here I was getting a divorce, and nobody in my family has ever gotten divorced. I didn't finish college. Everybody in my family has a college degree. Like, I was just the fuck up, and I was tired of it. I said, you know what? I said, I'm just going to try once. I'm just going to try. I don't think it's worth it. I don't know if it's worth it, but I'm going to try. So I looked up a meeting, 8 o'clock meeting or whatever it was. And I showed up, and I sat outside smoking cigarettes until everybody like, I sat across the street, and I waited until everybody went inside. And then, like 15 minutes after the meeting started, I walked in, took a seat in the back row. And then about 10 minutes before the meeting was over, I left. But it was the very first time I'd gone to a meeting of my own will that I decided. I wasn't there with a rehab. I wasn't there, pretending to be, because me and my wife were sober and we were going to meetings together. It was the first time I chose to do it. And that was the moment that the rest of my life changed.
What do you think happened that day? Like, it was there. Was it the fact that you went to your own will, which I guess it is, but like, did you hear something that night or
nothing that I hadn't heard 1,000 times before? It wasn't what I heard. It was what, I talk about this all the time. It's willingness.
Yeah.
I was finally willing. I was willing to try. And I say this to people a lot. It doesn't need to be, 80% willing and 20. Listen, if you can be 51% willing to do something and still 49% willing, and I need 1%. If you can make a 1% move in the direction of your dreams, it'll change everything.
Yeah.
Well, I went by myself, and then, listen, I went again the next day, and I went a little less late, and I left a little less early. And then within a week or so, I was staying for the whole meeting. And then, 6 months go by, 4 or 5 months go by, and I'm very comfortable, and I know everybody, and I'm hugging everybody and shaking hands, but I'm still full of shit. Because I've been in so many rehabs, I knew how to sound like I was sober, and I knew how to quote the big book and quote the steps and all the stuff and Bill and Bob. And I knew how to talk. Again, here I was a chameleon. It was just, instead of drug dealing, now it was AA, and I was fitting in again. But people were nice to me, so it was okay. And I was being nice to them, and that was okay. And I was sharing one night. I said, I'd gone to the mall that day, and I had a real hard time. I wanted to have a drink, but I didn't. And I was congratulating myself in the meeting. I was sounding very profound and spiritual. I knew how to talk. I knew how to bullshit. And I remember this guy was sitting in front of me, and he looked like Bluto from Popeye. I don't know if you have Popeye in Canada.
Yeah, we do.
Okay, Bluto. He literally had big black hair, big beard, an anchor on one forearm, a dragon on the other. And he turns around to me, and I was almost a year sober at that point. And he goes, "You're a fucking alcoholic. Of course you wanted to drink. That's what we do. It's no big deal." And he turned back around, and I started, and my old, angry, violent street guy self was like, does this motherfucker know who he's talking to? Does this guy know who I am? I've got almost a year sober. Everybody here likes me. And I got pissed. And then we took a cigarette break, and we were standing across from each other in this horseshoe turnaround of entrance to an hospital. And he started to walk towards me, and I got ready to fight, because that's what I did. So I took off my watch, my rings, I put everything in my pocket, I took off my necklace, and he got close to me, and he opened up his arms, and I stepped back, and I balled up my fists, and he came at me, and he wrapped me in this big hug. He's like, "Man, it's going to be okay." And at that moment, everything, every bit of anger and pain fell away. And I've never been, that was the moment of like my spirit. That was my moment of grace where this man was like, "What's your name, dude?" I was like, "I'm Noah." And he's like, "I'm Johnny. It's going to be okay." And he then became my sponsor, my best friend, my brother, my uncle, my mentor, my guide, my spiritual guide, my guru. He was one of the best friends I ever had. And he rests in peace, but he changed my life. And I thought we had to fight him.
That's crazy. I mean, those moments of frustration or interpretation of what the intent of the person in front of us is,
Yeah.
you know, like that's sometimes is, it almost kills us, you know, like, and I mean, you know, like not physically, but you know, like, kind of even in our soul, you know, like feeling that, you know, like the self-judgment and the self-deprecation of ourselves, you know, like the guy says that, and, you know, like you kind of bulk up your ego in the same time you're eating up your own spirit, you know, like you just, you know, like it's messed up, you know, like for me, it's just, sometimes you need to kind of step back and say, what, you know, like, what am I doing here? You know, like what is, you know, like what is that short fuse of mine? You know, like
it was a wall. It wasn't a fuse. It was a wall.
And I hate the image of, you know, like if it makes you angry, it's because it's your, you know, like it's a reflection of your own self. And I'm like, fuck off, you know, like it's not necessarily that, you know, like sometimes it happens, but sometimes it's something else, you know, like it's either some of my own traumas, you know, like even though I think it's a big word, but you know, like it's kind of your own trauma, and you know, like the way you interpret, you know, like something that's said, and you know, like it kind of triggers you, and you know, again, you know, like I think it's a weird time to talk about triggers, but you know.
Listen, I don't want to leave that part out of my story. I do have traumas. I have been diagnosed with PTSD. I have multiple traumas. I've been shot at. I've been stabbed. I grew up in a combat, like what was essentially a combat zone, which was the Bronx, New York, in the 1970s. I've had people hold me off the edge of buildings trying to kill me. I've had sexual trauma that I've recently realized was sexual trauma. That was not. It was, you know, I thought it was a cool thing, and I bragged about it for a lot of years until somebody very recently in my life said, "Oh, so you were sexually traumatized?" And I was like, "No, I was 10 years old, and my friend's older sister gave me a blowjob and taught me how to fuck her." And he's like, "That's assault." And I was like, "Oh, yeah." So that happened. And when he said that, I realized that all these years of like sort of bragging about it were just my way of covering it up. How, you know, sort of not, I don't want to say awful, but like how uncomfortable it felt, and it made me feel weird. And like, it's not natural for a 10-year-old boy to be having sex with a 15-year-old girl, you know, and I've had violent traumas. And so I've had all those things. You know, they've happened to me, and I've dealt with them in the way I've dealt with them through the steps and through, you know, professional counseling and things like that. But when you said the word trauma, I didn't want to leave that out of my story, because I think it's important to recognize that and let people know that it's okay.
And embracing it as part of your story, you know, like that's one thing, you know, like even, you know, like some of the, you know, like characters' defects, I've decided at some point, you know, like I think I was after my 5th or 6th year anniversary of sobriety, that I decided that some of these defects of character are going to be embraced by, you know, like I'm going to embrace them and defining this by a bit of who I am. You know, like I wouldn't be the aggressive, passionate sales guy that I am, you know, like in my professional life, if it wasn't for some of these, what people would consider or label defects, you know, like, and I decided to, which is weird, you know, like, but, you know, like there's some point that, you know, like you need to embrace some of the stuff that happened in your life to, you know, like almost emerge from that, you know, like a better self.
I hear what you're saying. I don't, you know, everybody's journey is different. Anything that I consider a defect of character is nothing that I embrace. I think there are things that I do that other people, like you're saying, people might say it's a defect of character. I don't see it, but like anything that's been the defects of character that we talk about in the book, and we jealousy and anger and rage and low self-esteem and things like that. Those I work actively to keep out of my life, because I made a decision to turn my life over. And I've asked I've asked for God to remove those. So for me to hang on to them is not for me personally, and your journey is your journey and my journey is mine. And there's a million different ways to get sober, and there's only one way to relapse. So I think that's the beauty of what we do, is that, you have your way of sobriety and I have mine, but we can meet in the middle in a common goal.
Absolutely. And you're right when when there's a static list of what you just mentioned. Mm-hmm. I'm 100% with you. If it was just for anger, but I think you said it right at the beginning in terms of some as maybe broaden that list to a point where they would identify stuff that I am into what as defects of character, and at some point I need to push these away as kind of a judgment of my personality. So
I don't what other people think of me. I don't really care. How I affect other people, I care about.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Those are two completely different ends of the spectrum. Listen, my old sponsor, another sponsor, may rest in peace, Al, used to say, listen, life is like it's like walking in a room where there's 100 people. 50 of them don't like you and 50 of them love you. Which 50 are you going to pay attention to? And so it's like I pay attention to the people that get me, that love me. I believe I'm a man of honor and truth and respect, and I try my best to be kind to people. If I'm unkind or I say something that hurts somebody's feelings, I immediately on the spot make amends and I apologize, and to never do that again. I'm flawed. I have difficulties sometimes, especially being an older man in a young world where everybody is very sensitive and the rules of speech have changed.
Yeah.
How you can talk to people, the words you can use. And sometimes I get caught, I'm a kid from the 70s and it's 2020 and it's a long time, and it's, I don't say, things that are like vehemently racist or sexist, but somebody will catch me and be like, we don't really use that language anymore. I'll be like, okay. And I learn.
Yeah, and I think we lost in the past few years. We lost a bit of the purpose of intent. Like you just said it. You're intentionally not into that. So like anyone that knows me, a few years ago I offended someone, and they were like, yeah, but you you offended me, and I was like, but it was never my intention. Yeah. I'm sorry about it. But if you didn't catch that I'm not that type of person, you don't know me well. I would never do something to truthfully hurt someone, ever, so as I talk, as I mentioned, some of I do have sometimes a rougher and a tougher humor, and sometimes it shakes people, but you said it best, the past few years has been a bit, we lost the interpretation or the translation of intent, even though some words may sound, old timers and out of our times, it is never. And I get that there are outrageous stuff that you can't say, and I would never say them, but sometimes even in we're getting more and more sensible to that, and it's a tough time for it.
Listen, if I offend somebody, I immediately apologize. I check myself on my intention. Was I careless? And I have been, I've been careless with my words, and that's gotten me into trouble, but not bad trouble. But I don't want to ever hurt anybody's feelings. So, if there's things that I want to say or stupid things that I want to say, listen, I leave it between me and my best friend, because we can laugh about stuff that's just between us. But my intention walking through the world, and the only way that I can stay sober, is to make sure my side of the street is clean. If I offend somebody and they want to hold on to that and be angry at me or like have a resentment, that's on them. They'll never hear those words come out of my mouth again.
Yeah.
So that's purely on them. But me, I want to clean up my side of the street. I want to correct any wrongs I've made, and I want to treat people with kindness and dignity and love.
The last, like the second to last question I got for you, Noah, is what would be, like kind of a healthy diet of keeping your sobriety healthy?
It's a simple program for complicated people. It's like they said to me when I first came around AA: sit down, shut up, close your mouth, open your ears, go to meetings, don't drink, call your sponsor. And it's still that way today. It's still so simple. It's a very simple thing to do. And we complicate it. We make it complex. You got to work the steps. You got to read the book. You got to do it. You don't have to do it every day. You have to work the steps when you first get sober. And, immediately that's that's what is most important, to complete the steps and have that feeling of completion and have that profound spiritual experience. And then to maintain that. One thing that we haven't talked about is that, after I had that, powerful spiritual moment, I had 15 years of sobriety and I relapsed. Because for the last year of that, for the first 14 years, I was the guy. I went to every meeting. I spoke at a big, I think it was Eastern Canada convention, decades ago, when I was living in Connecticut. I was a speaker at a convention up there. I was a circuit speaker. I went to meetings. I went to every meeting every night. I had like 20, 30 sponsees, grand sponsees, great grand sponsees. I mean, I did everything. But in the last year, I stopped going to meetings. And I smoked a little weed, and I didn't stop for 3.5 years because I went right back into what I do best. I started dealing weed, and I dealt so much weed, and I dealt it on such an epic level that I got arrested, and I was facing about 15 years in prison. And I got a really good lawyer, and I did 6 months in rehab. And when I walked into the rehab, I was like, holy shit, I used to be sober. And I forgot about my sobriety, and that was 13 and a half years ago. So, now I refuse to ever be that guy again. So I won't slip. I won't let up on my meetings. You got to go to meetings.
Have you added, like you talked about, like your job being in spinning classes, and, have you added kind of, like the healthy living to that, like, cause, like there is, I've had it kind of to my ammunition, making sure that I train, that I keep my body in some kind of shape, I try to eat clean, like even saying it, I feel ashamed saying it, but I've added to, even in readings, like in expanding my culture of other people doing it in different ways. And have you added stuff to that, like kind of almost that triangle of habits?
Physically, I started when I got sober this time. After I was a couple of years sober, I started working as case manager in rehabs. And when you're working in rehabs, you do a lot of redirection with clients. It's like if you're inside and they're feeling like shit, you go, let's go outside and have a smoke. And if you're outside and they're having a smoke and they feel like shit, you go, let's go inside and get something to eat. So I was bouncing in and out so much that I ended up 300 pounds smoking 4 packs of cigarettes a day and working 12 hours on, 12 hours off at a rehab. And I was very close to dying from a heart attack because I was so fat. And then I went to this place called Soul Cycle, and I started riding, and I lost about 100 pounds in a little over 90 days. And they asked me to become, because they'd had a bunch of people who worked for the company who were instructors that came from the physical fitness field, but I was coming from the mental health and the spiritual world. So they asked me to become an instructor. I moved back to New York, and for the first 6 years that I was here, I've been teaching for 8 years. I was riding almost every day, and I was maintaining my weight, and I was in great shape. But about 2 years ago, I had my knees started giving out, because I played a lot of sports when I was younger and a lot of fighting, and my knees took the brunt of my physical abuse. So my knees gave out, and I had to have my right kneecap replaced. So I haven't been able to ride the bike and do all the fitness things that I want to do. So I sort of got in not great shape. And then this last August, I had a heart attack. I nearly died. And then I also became diagnosed. When I went to the hospital, I got diagnosed as a type 2 diabetic. So now I'm getting exercise all the time, and I'm eating very well. So, it's what I don't take care of will, either whether it's sobriety or my physical health or my mental health, it will come back. It will pop up. It's gonna become a problem if I don't take care of it. I believe this is a mental, physical, and spiritual process of recovery, and you've got to take care of all three. If you're just eating everything in sight and you're gaining a bunch of weight, and you're not going to be happy.
Yeah. The last question I got for you, Noah, is
I also know a bunch of people who are super physically fit and in great shape. I had a friend of mine, a good friend of mine, who was like super fitness guy and posting all these pictures of his fucking 6-pack abs all over Instagram. And he was fucking so spiritually and emotionally sick that he ended up having to go to fucking rehab without drinking. He had to go back to fucking sex rehab because we were fucking just so I don't care about your 6-pack abs. Everything has to be taken care of.
Exactly. No, exactly. And I think, I had a conversation with a friend of mine that, anyways, he's over a year now sober, and 2 years now. And we had a conversation about feeling yourself. I think this is probably one of the most important aspect of keeping your sobriety sane, is to feel yourself. There's huge debate around, for example, the beer with no alcohol in, and some are so against it, and some are just like, well, if it keeps you going, sober, that's fine. Recently someone, I had like a sample taste of something that was like, I don't know, there's like a gin and tonic with no alcohol, and there's like rum and Coke with no alcohol in.
Yeah.
And I had a taste of it, and it never ever triggered me.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, I've been drinking sparkling water and water for the past 15 years, so that's kind of a change of taste that, I welcome it,
Yeah.
And why my wife knew my position against, a non-alcoholic beer, and she was like, is it okay? I was like, well, I need to feel myself, I really need to step back and listen to myself, and not bullshit me, not lie to me, not, be 100% honest about this, or else I'm falling into a trap. I'm definitely, the insidious part of the sickness will let me fall into that trap. And I think that's the most important piece of it. Sometimes I talk to myself in a negative way, in terms of my physical health, if I slack, if I let go, okay, just step it up, and I swear a lot, but there's a lot of kind of almost like whipping myself to initiate something, whatever it is, start running, walking, I go outside, I train, I have a great installation of, kind of gym equipment in my garage, it's like, there's no fucking excuse, just go in there and push something, and
10 minutes.
Yeah. And it's just about feeling yourself, and amplify it and multiply it. And yeah, like, so the importance of listening and feeling yourself is, like, I think one of the most important aspect of getting better.
Being aware, just being aware.
Yeah.
Aware of self.
Yep.
Where you are.
The last thing I'm going to ask you, Noah, is, I was inspired for the last hour about, like, your whole story, but, like, are you out there in like in the, like the social medias, or, like, is there ways for people to reach out to you? Is there a way for people to, like, find you online? You talked about a book, so let me know what's going on.
I'll go through everything. For the last about over a decade, I've been a life coach. I'm a certified life coach. I have a website, noahshaw.com, NOASHAW. I'm also very big on Instagram. My page, about a little less than a year ago, I stopped putting myself on there really, and it's just spiritual sayings and spiritual and motivational and positivity and love and kindness. And so that's my page. It's Noah Shaw 26 on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. People can email me directly if they want. Noah Shaw at mac.com. I'm happy to help anybody. This is what I do for a living. Outside of teaching spinning, I'm also full time. I work with people. I have clients meet with every day all around the world, every age range from 16 to my oldest client is 69, 68 years old. So I just work with people, and I've been put on this planet. I've been granted the gift of sobriety, and I just want to. It's sort of a living, working, constantly amends to the world, because I realized after being a drug dealer for so long, the amount of poison and pain that I'd put out in the world, that now it's my job to help people heal. So that's what I do.
So for every listeners, Noah is going to provide me with all these links, and like, if you scroll down to whatever podcast platform that you're listening it to, just scroll down a bit, like, you're going to find all the links. So
also a podcast called I'm Here to Help. So I've got
absolutely. I mean, I was ashamed of telling you that I didn't have the opportunity to listen to it, but I will absolutely right after a recording.
As somebody very wise once told me, you don't know what you don't know.
Exactly. But, I didn't do my homework, like, shame on me.
No shame. We had enough shame when we were getting high.
Exactly. Noah, like, there are some times where, like, I identify myself, and there are some times where at some point during conversations, I'm like, what the fuck just happened? The guy got debriefed on my life story, and like, he's talking about me. We're like, what the fuck's going on here? And I will say, to a point where even what you're drinking right now, I'm drinking the same. Yep. You're drinking a can of Liquid Death. I do have my own can of Liquid Death,
really?
Right? I'm not kidding.
A friend of mine started that company.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I'm glad to hear that.
You took a sip like half an hour ago. I was like, oh, what's going on? Yeah. What's going on?
On my podcast, I give them a shout out. They're my unofficial podcast sponsor.
And so it's one of those times where, like, of some of the sayings that you had, and some of the reflection, and not necessarily in your life story, but like, in some of the how you felt, and like, how like the like, you got me, Noah. So I'm I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful for you accepting to be part of that, and
I'm honored to be asked to be on the show. So thank you.
So all I can say is thanks to you, Noah. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Au revoir.
Au revoir.